It is Monday, March 3rd, 2025. I am Zach Barnett. Below me is my esteemed colleague, John Brice. And to my right are two faces that are new to the Football Scoop podcast. There's a reason for that. You are tuned into a all caps very special episode of the Football Scoop podcast. So last week we discussed the state of recruiting in 2025, how high school prospects get recruited, how these families navigate this. So the three of us, John, Scott, and myself, we were talking based off of as the business as we understand it, but we do not live this business the way our two guests do. So we brought on two experts in this field. Top right is football coach's agent, and football parent, Warren McCarty. And then bottom right is football coach and football parent, Coach Rick Feinberg. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having us.
So I described you guys in very generic terms for a reason. So we'll start with you, Warren. Why don't you summarize your background in this game, both yourself, and then tell us a little bit about your son as well.
Well, I spent 11 years in pro football, coaching and scouting and team management. Kind of got out of that world in 2008. And now fast forward to today, I own a coaching agency. So I represent 21 NFL and NCAA coaches. Families have been hiring me since 2008 to handle the recruiting process for their sons for football. So I represent guys here in Colorado primarily, and then in Texas, where I'm originally from, and some in California as well. Train quarterbacks from the NFL and CFL down to middle school kids, and also do quite a bit of consulting as well for athletic directors at the D1 and FCS levels. So I kind of got I get to scratch all my football itches, so to speak, and I certainly see a lot of the sides of what's going on in college football with respect to recruiting. And then, my son Blitz is a junior right now at Grandview High School here in Aurora. He has 3 D1 offers, and we are right in the thick of recruitment for him as a QB.
How about you, Rick?
Yeah, so I was a former athlete myself. I grew up in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, played football at Ohio University in the Mid-American Conference. And then, my career ended, got married, started having a family. And my oldest son, when he became probably a sophomore in high school, I was trying to find a speed coach here in Charleston, South Carolina. I couldn't find one, right? So I decided, you know what, I'm a former athlete. I have pretty good knowledge about, how to condition and train for speed. So I got certified by the National Association of Speed and Explosion in 2014. And I started a speed training business called Charleston Speed Academy here in Charleston, South Carolina. So I started training my son and then, his friends. And then next thing you know, I'm training kids from like all over the city of Charleston. And it's still going very strong today. I have my youngest boy, Brock. He's a class of 25, student athlete, 3-sport athlete. And his main sport right now is football. And that's what he's been getting recruited for.
So let's start with you. Both of you guys have been in the business for a while. So just we'll start with you, Warren. How have you seen the process, the business of getting recruited change in your time? And specifically, it seems like so much of the world changed right around COVID, and that just happened to coincide with the changes that were happening within college football. But that's a pretty good dividing line for so many areas of life. But it really seems like if you go back to 2019, now to where we are 2025, it seems like the world's a different place.
You're right, Zach. The world is a completely different place, and it did start with COVID, because at that point, once the dust settled from COVID and the NCAA gave all of those athletes a waiver, that is when it's like recruiting hit the wall for high school kids, okay? Because suddenly, for the first time, there were fewer roster spots. As simple as that. Then things just started to stack, I feel like, in favor against high school kids. And like I said, I represent coaches, so I understand the pressures that they're under when they have the mechanism of the transfer portal, and older players who got that, extra COVID year, they're just comes a point where philosophically each individual staff decides whether they're all in on high school kids, sort of in on high school kids, or not at all. And it just each year, just incrementally, because of lawsuits and rules changes and things of that nature, it just it's been a dramatic decline in the desire for coaches to sign high school kids. The numbers bear that out, but it absolutely started with COVID.
Rick, yeah, if you could follow up on that, particularly since you've run a speed academy there in the greatest city, because that's where we got married. Since you've been there since 2014 with your speed academy, how have you specifically seen it evolve over that time, culminating with your son's recruitment right now? Because you mentioned he's a three sport prospect in the 25 class, so in this class.
Right. Yeah. So, in the very beginning, the coaches would basically, there wasn't really Twitter, X, back then. I mean, it was around, but no one was really using it. It was kind of still like the old fashioned way of recruiting, where the college coaches would visit, the campus, during the contact period, or the kids would go ahead and visit, the colleges, during a quiet period. And, they were a lot of college coaches were relying on guys like myself or the high school coaches to, expose like these great athletes to them, so they could go ahead and take a look at them, their film, or just watch them during spring ball or during the season. And now, it's so different. Everything is like based on this like social media platform. You have so many more camps and combines, that are going around. And, with transfer portal, there wasn't a transfer portal back then in the very beginning. Now we have the transfer portal. And then with the new rule of the 105, that's probably going to go into effect. I guess it's not really official quite yet. That's limiting spots even more. So like with the pressure for these coaches to win right now, they need more senior leadership. They may have to replace a starter, like with a seasoned veteran type guy from another program. They can't take a chance on a high school kid. So like Warren was saying, the spots for the high school kid are just getting less and less and less. And it's been very frustrating.
In your professional capacities, how much time do each one of you guys spend educating families on the process of everyone wants to go play for Ohio State and Georgia, but that's only the reality for a select few. How much time do you spend educating them, and then what's it like dealing with parents and players as they help them come to grips with reality of, your kids are very talented at what he does, but he's 17 years old and he's competing with 21, 22-year-olds for spots on these Division I teams.
Rick, I'll let you go first.
Okay, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time. Like, I train several hours in a week, and when I do train the football players, I mean, it's always a good 20, 30 minutes after their session, or sometimes even before the session, discussing the recruiting. And for the parent, they don't understand it. And it's hard to really explain. And a lot of parents think that their kids, may be at a certain level when they're really not at that level. So it's very frustrating. Like, they kind of close their ears to like the lower levels. And for the kid, I mean, they just get like depressed, they're in a funk. They just don't know how to deal with it properly. They're just not mature enough to really deal with these kind of emotions, because they've been training their whole lives and working hard, and they're really good football players, but they don't have a home. So they're thinking, wow, am I not good enough? When they really are. So for me to try to, keep their spirits up and the mental capacity high, it's taken a lot of conversations to do that.
Yeah.
Warren, I would like to ask you, specific to your son being a 2026 prospect, what has the recruiting process looked like for you so far? And then, you don't have to name schools, but just sort of assess where it stands right now, and maybe how much it is being impacted by the potential of the 105 man, which I don't have anyone telling me it won't be formally passed. I think in April is when that goes. I know schools are already making preparations here as they unfold spring camps to tell guys like, hey, at the end of camp, we're going to have some tough decisions. It's nothing personal. It's out of our hands. But there are places preparing to cut anywhere from 13 to 18 to maybe 20 walk-ons. And as the coach told me last month at the convention, that means a lot of good players are going to be available on the street, so to speak. So how is all of this impacting your son's 26 recruitment?
Well, that's great questions there, John. I think, first of all, I would say that for Blitz, growing up, hearing my business and popping in my office and listening in on calls and stuff, he's got a good level head on his shoulders. But I'll give you a great example. I won't mention the coach's name, but Division I head coach that all of us know that's in the Southeast told me, hey, I love Blitz's film. He's going to have a ton of group of 5 offers. I would offer him right now. It's a no-brainer, but I think we're 1 over. And based on this 105, we're going to have to get rid of 2. I don't know that I'm even going to sign a 2026 quarterback. So to me, that, like in a nutshell, is like what he's dealing with. Now, and I want to preface that by saying he's had very clear eyes. His ultimate goal, he wants to play in the National Football League and be a franchise quarterback, right? But he saw the story Yahoo Sports did about, this year 49 of the 68 Power 4 programs started a transfer at quarterback. You look at schools like Miami and Oregon, and there are others who it's been 4 or 5 years since they played a homegrown quarterback. So for him, he's like, man, that'd be awesome to be a Georgia Bulldog or Ohio State Buckeye, but the chances of me actually getting a chance to play are super low. So his eyes have been on group of 5 and upper echelon FCS schools for a while anyway. But even in that realm, I can't tell you how many coaches have, and trust me, there have been plenty that, Blitz wasn't their flavor. He's left-handed. Not everybody wants to coach a lefty. None of that's offensive to us. Like, I totally get it. Like, my kid's not going to be for everybody. He's not the best thing since sliced bread. I don't present him in that way. But there have been plenty of coaches who are like, we love him, but. And it's that but gets back to, John, what we're talking about. 105-man roster. The days of carrying 8 QBs on your roster, that's gone, guys. That is over. It's going to look a lot more like 5 or 6 maybe, because you only got 105 spots. One of those dudes is playing. One's your backup. Do you really need 4 more arms? I think that's what coaches are thinking about specifically at the QB position. And then just in general, as I'm helping families with recruitment, it is those tough conversations that Rick is talking about. Not that they're not a D1 dude. It's the circumstances say you're not a D1 dude right now. We have to start thinking about post-grad prep school, JUCO. We're starting out in the D2 world and establishing dominance and then maybe moving up to FCS or D1. Those are tough conversations to have when a parent is thinking Johnny is all galaxy and everybody's always told them Johnny's all galaxy. He's getting a scholarship paid for. We're good. We're not having to pay for school. Well, as you guys know, there ain't no such thing as a ride at D2 unless you're, that JUCO guy that they're bringing in or the D1 bounce back dude. There's no high school kids getting full rides at the D2 level. So that's, mom and dad are like, we're going to have to, hold on. You're telling me we're going to have to pay for school at the D2 level. And then if he does great for a few years, then he can move up and maybe he'll be on a full ride. Like that is not how they envisioned recruiting go, but that's very much the reality.
Rick, your son's a 2025. What does his recruitment look like right now?
I just want to kind of, piggyback on what Warren said. So my son's in a spot where he has D2 and D3 offers, but like the context that I have at the collegiate level are telling me we're not plucking D2 and D3 kids to D1. We're not going that far. There's enough FBS kids in the portal, FCS kids in the portal. We're just going that route. So now we're having to make a decision of having to like reclassify in post-grad, which is what I think we're going to do, because my son has been evaluated by so many FCS player. And, if he post-grads and puts together some solid film, potentially he can be P4 guy, right? So that's the situation that we're in right now. And I think we're 99% sure we're going to post-grad and reclassify. Now it's just a matter of, what's the best home for him post-grad wise, and how do we afford that? Because it's expensive.
Along those lines, Rick, sort of following up on that, when did you guys maybe feel like this was going to have to be the best path? I mean, if you're a 25 kid, you don't start getting recruited in fall of 24. So obviously along this timeline, your son has been getting recruited to a certain extent, but when did you realize or start to realize that this may be the necessary path for you and your family?
Yeah, so I have a lag here, so I'm trying to hear you clearly. I don't know if it's happening to the other guys or not, but so my son was going to be an early enrollee and sign early signing day in December. But what happened was, and I won't mention the school's name, there was an FBS school that said, hold on, we're not sure, we're not really having a great season. We may want to get some senior leadership here and go portal. Weeks later, that staff, the head coach ended up getting dismissed from the school, and then the school would not honor. So now we're at early signing day with no place to sign, and then we find out that everyone else has moved on. So there wasn't even a spot for him anywhere else. So we thought, okay, the next chance that potentially we have is after the second signing day, or really, the real, let's say the normal signing day in February. And it was pretty much the same thing. Like every single spot was already full. We couldn't even find a home for him. Like D2 and D3, colleges just started contacting him and blowing his phone up and DMing him because they were salivating over him that he was still an uncommitted player. But the path that he wants to take, educationally and athletically, based on what I'm hearing, how the D1 guys are not going to D2 and D3 to pluck them out of the portal, we think that could be a mistake, because then all of a sudden he's got eligibility issues that we need to be concerned about if he were to go that route. So that's why we're thinking post-grad is probably the best way to go to reclassify.
Warren, I'm curious, what feedback do you get from the coaches that you represent? Because you specifically those at the FBS level, they're on the other end of this, where they're now choosing 20, 21-year-olds that have spent a couple years at a college program getting developed and all that stuff. Are they seeing a better product now because of this, or no?
No. Every one of my Division I clients, and hell, my FCS clients for that matter, are all in a conundrum, because the outside pressure from the boosters, let's just be frank about it, back in the day, pre-COVID, you had those 2 or 3 big baller boosters that wrote the big checks, and they kind of had a little bit of a voice with the head coach, right? Now it's like these D1 guys have their head coach has 150 bosses, because it takes that many people to write significant checks to keep that NIL compensation fund available and provide the programs with what they need. Bob's Used Cars writes a check for $1,000. He appreciates a little handwritten note. People start writing checks for 10 G's, 25 G's, 50, 6 figures. They expect to have a voice. That's how their world works. right? So my D1 clients are like, man, we have all this pressure to go get dudes from the portal. But what people don't think about is, and I have helped kids in the portal, so it's not like every kid in the portal is a mercenary. But when you bring in 20 new faces, it can kind of feel that way to the guys that are already in the room. And is the product really better? Man, I'd say probably not, because you got dudes, you're having to reteach offense and defense and schematics, not just in spring, but then you got to turn around and do it again in the summer. So I feel like there's a lot of my own clients are like, man, we're having to kind of dummy down some stuff that 5 years ago we could really get into the nuance of it. But when you got new faces coming in and they've already learned 2 offenses but haven't mastered anything, it's a whole lot of getting back to basics in terms of scheme. So not only do you have outside pressures to go get veterans, the flip side of that is coaching veterans on short notice is way different than having a kid you've been coaching for 3 years because you got him out of high school. So a lot of dudes that are torn up about, what is the right thing to do. And then frankly, on the coaching side of the business, all these people who are writing checks and are having a say in it also are demanding immediate results, because in theory you're going to get veteran players. So shouldn't it not take 3 years to get rolling? Shouldn't we be able to flip our roster and look so much better next season? And then if that doesn't happen, or the results aren't coming as fast as they hope for, then we've got heat. Then the head coach is on the hot seat. It's not a healthy situation.
And I want to follow up on that. Again, this is the Football Scoop podcast. I'm John Brice, joined by my colleague Zach Barnett, along with Warren McCarty and Rick Feinberg. Warren, I wanted to ask you, specifically following up that, what do you see as the tipping point in this scenario? And how do you think, with your experience in contract law, how do you expect the House settlement, if formally ratified in April, how do you expect that to unfold?
John, that's a great question. I hate to be like the bearer of bad news or to sound like doom and gloom, because we all love this game. We love college football. I do. Everybody on here does. But nothing, including the House settlement, getting to 105 and the revenue share and all those things, I consult for schools as well. I can tell you right now, based on the current model we're at, we don't have 40 Division I programs out of the 130 that turn a profit on football. I'm serious. We're at 80 plus schools some of them lose their ass on football to do Division I level. Now we're talking about having to revenue share with players, reduced rosters, increased cost. Yeah, maybe there's going to be more TV money because of the playoff and the expansion. But what I really see happening is, this group of Power Fours that are healthy, and that is not all 68 are healthy, but a group of that eventually is going to split off and just do their own thing. And then we have to figure out what does college football look like for the rest of Power Four on through the group of 5 and down to the FCS. And I'll say this, look at what Bobby has done at Montana. Look at the success they've had at North Coast State. I know right now that they're financially way more healthy than a whole lot of group of 5 schools. So is that like a new realm of football that's being created? I don't know, but the way this House settlement is going to impact schools financially, I don't think people understand the ramifications of what's going to happen. And it might not, January 1st, 2026, all hell breaks loose and the thing falls apart. I'm not saying that. But what is being agreed upon is not sustainable for the vast majority of Division I football. It's not financially sustainable. And that's including, hey, we're taking money from the academic side, from the school itself. At some point, people just say, hey, when's enough? When is enough, right?
I'd like to go from the extreme macro to the very narrow micro here and ask you guys as parents. We'd all love to go pro in football, but football ends for us at some point sooner than we'd all like. So, and I hate to be high horse guy, but the point of college football is to come out at the end of the day with a degree that you can go get a job with. So now that both of your sons are planning on transferring at some point, does that, what are your conversations like as far as that realm of the education? Like, I'm curious, like, do you have to plot out your major to something that's maybe not as niche as they might be considering, because certain schools might not have that, it might not be as marketable other places. What are your conversations like on that front? We'll start with you, Rick.
Man, they're very difficult, because I think that my son has had some tremendous opportunities to play Division III football, where I know he would have such a solid education with a tremendous network of alum that would get him a job in a second. I know that. And I think his experience of playing football would probably be fun. The flip side of that is that's not his dream. It's not his goal to be in bowl games. He wants to, be on TV, wants to play on TV. He just has, those kind of goals and aspirations. So, and I get it, because I was there. I understand where he's coming from, and I don't want to take that away from him. It's like, that's why this whole reclass thing is okay. Well, if that's what you want to do, where we are right now, either we wait and see what happens during spring ball, and maybe somebody is going to believe in you and take a chance on you, but maybe they won't. So we need to plan. The class of 26 is already established, and the 26 in place. So we have to make some really, really quick decisions on what to do. Either wait for that, spring ball, see what happens, or just say, you know what, we're going to reclassify your class of 26. Let's press the reset button. And that's kind of where we are. That's what we're leaning towards.
What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I would say academically, Blitz is making things pretty easy on us. His interests outside of football are playing a guitar and fishing. Like, fishing's his passion. So really, he's thinking that he'll go business, because he can do that anywhere. And maybe that leads to coaching. If he decided he wanted to get into this crazy ass business, then he would probably do kinesiology or something like that. Maybe sports management, which obviously isn't offered everywhere, but he doesn't have a specific path where he's like, hey, as soon as I'm done with football, I know I want to go into this, or this. He's been pretty open. So thankfully, that gives us a lot of flexibility. Maybe he would want to do something, with wildlife management, things of that nature, which certainly you couldn't do at every school. But he's been pretty open and flexible. Now, I've got some other kids that I handle the recruitment for that are very specific about what they want. And just within the transfer portal, I'll give you a good example. The amount of credits that Colorado State wouldn't accept on one of my transfer kids transferring from Boise State was bonkers. Like, basically trying to cost the kid a semester, 18 to 24 hours of credits at what I would consider an equivalent school. The stories I'm hearing from kids all the time about, and that's something that's not being talked about a lot, is getting that transfer portal is great if you're able to better yourself. But man, the strawberry they're taking on the credits that are allowed to transfer, some of it's outrageous. It's just like completely obnoxious. So getting back to your point about getting a degree, grad transfer is one thing, but when you're undergrads and they're like that, is getting lost in the sauce that all these schools are not necessarily accepting everything from an equivalent school. It's kind of wild. That's going to be a problem too for guys who don't make it to the league, don't make a tremendous amount of money playing college football. Everybody's going to get some, but when the dust is settling and their eligibility's up, do they even have their bachelor's degree yet?
So for either or both of you guys, then what do you believe are some real world practical solutions or potential solutions or avenues to help this process?
Well, I'll jump in here first, Rick. I'll say this. I think, we heard it at convention. The guys that we all talk to, my own clients, coaches, you guys know, ADs, everybody keeps talking about wanting rules, guardrails. So, John, when you talk about real world solutions and what can we do to try to make sense of all this, at some point, that is what is separating college football right now. I know I sound like such a downer today on the show. I didn't mean that, but until we get structure, this Wild West thing is going to continue. And that's the difference between Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NCAA, everywhere else. There's structure. There's contracts. There's times when you can talk. There's times when you can't. There's a calendar in place. It makes sense. Right now, none of it makes sense. And we've got, other than the settlement terms, I think everybody's got to come to an agreement on what they want the rules to be. I don't even know if we can have those conversations yet because there's such a divide amongst even within the Power Four. Like, I know of Coach Jake Dickert, at Wake Forest, but if you go look at Wake Forest's financials compared to even within their own conference, FSU and Clemson, they're in two different galaxies right now. Okay. And it's not that gap ain't going to close based on the settlement terms. So, John, I think we have to get rules in place, but step one is we got to have some sort of leadership, a commissioner, a czar, or somebody who can get the individual school leaders on the same page on just some basic structure, because we have no structure at this point.
What about you, Rick?
There's a committee for the football, the playoff championship system of guys and women that are pretty smart, trying to put together the best, possible scenario and what would be great, for college football. I mean, I think there's plenty of retired guys, people who are currently, involved, that should form a committee and talk about like these real life problems on what's going on. I mean, it improves the game and the environment, but nothing about what we're talking about seems to make sense or improving the game at all. And, something has to be done there. So there's a lot more smarter people than me that are probably closer to it, that could probably wrap their arms around it and make some good decisions that would be good for the game and recruiting and the high school kid as well.
All right, gentlemen. Well, I told you we'd keep you 20 to 25 minutes, and now we're closing in on 35. So I want to thank you both for doing this and offering your expertise. And best of luck to both of you and your sons as they start their college football journey.
Yeah, thanks for helping us make this more personal. Thanks for being so candid and letting us. We want to serve others, and you guys both deserve a lot of credit for being willing to come on here and be as transparent and as open as you have been.
Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, guys, and thank you for listening to the Football Scoop podcast. We're out.